The following is a recording of an interview I conducted with Senator Kevin O'Toole of New Jersey.
Yep, definitely. My paper is about the recently passed New Jersey law, the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights. And what I'm looking into is what you think was the reason that the state needed to pass the law. I know we had a law in 2002. Like, what was lacking in the old law that we needed a new one, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, look, the fact of the matter is, until there's a tragedy like Tyler's, things like this just don't, grab the kind of attention that's warranted. It's interesting, Lindsay, you see once the event with Tyler where he committed suicide, it was such an awful, awful thing. It really, the next day we were in the Senate, and many of the senators talked about how that really touched many of us. Mm-hmm. That, imagine how awful it would be. I mean, you as a student, we've all been down that road. We've all had, instances where we didn't feel the greatest, where people would pick on us. But to the extent you're going to threaten to kill yourself and you actually do it, I mean, clearly that shook the consciousness of, many of us to act in. It was a rare opportunity. Republicans and Democrats got together and said this has to be stopped, and you really have to educate. You got to punish. You got to do a lot of proactive things to try to make sure we can eliminate as much of this as humanly possible. Mm-hmm. I was watching if you saw the YouTube clip about the child that was in Philadelphia who was picked on. Did you see that?
No, I didn't see it.
You should check that out because that'll help you. It was about 5 or 6 members, 13, 14-year-olds, and they were beating up, dragging this kid through the snow, hung up in a tree, hung up by a jack on a gate. Really awful, disgusting, despicable. And they recorded the fence and got the attention. All those people got arrested. And then, interestingly, Barbara Walters and the others brought him to the show on The View, and some of his heroes, Deshaun Jackson from the Philadelphia Eagles and others, they brought attention. They were hugging him and saying it was really courageous of you to stand up. And you never would have seen that before, so whether it's Tyler or the individual in Philadelphia, there's a national awakening of this issue and an understanding that these victims need to be supported, encouraged, and hopefully you bring more attention to this one. Hopefully it'll drive some of the message home that this intolerable behavior.
Mm-hmm. So so do you think the laws before weren't effective at all?
Well, listen, you can make every law in the books, whether it's against murder or bullying or anything else, and it doesn't necessarily going to have the ability to stop everything. Mm-hmm. It's not like the movie Minority Report where you just you can foresee the future. But I think if you educate, I think it requires every few years you have to educate the public. Because 2002 was 8 years ago, and maybe some kids were in grammar school and they weren't aware of it. Now they're in high school, and now it's much more prevalent, relevant to their upbringing. Mm-hmm. So laws in the books need to be brought out, talked about for those of the community that are being impacted. So if you're in high school, perhaps you need to go and talk to the kids in high school when they get to 7th, 8th grade, and talk about what the bullying statutes are, what the cause and effect, what's the emotional strain, the cost, physically, and I think you just need to keep talking about it. The same thing with the evils of drunk driving and, drug use and, handling, illegal narcotics. I mean, I think there's never a time you can stop talking about that to the ever-changing next generation.
You think that obviously kids before, or when I was in high school, we didn't have cell phones or computers. Do you think that the introduction of technology and cyberbullying has made bullying worse? And that's why we need...
I think so. I think, first of all, you have, Facebook. People are starting to take, pot shots at each other. There's some, photographs that are being used that are less than flattering. You have the cell phones that project images, whether it's bullying or other inappropriate messages. And I think technology has brought some of that, front and center. And there's an upside and downside, clearly, by some of the people playing with this and thinking it's fun or funny. It's obviously not good, but by also seeing some of it, I think it gives us proof in black and white what's happening, so we can no longer ignore that it's happening in somebody else's neighborhood, somebody else's city. It's happening right here in our communities. Mm-hmm.
Do you think that because New Jersey just passed this law, are we a step ahead of the rest of the country in preventing?
It's a great question, Liz. And I got to tell you, after we passed it, we got national headlines. People were talking about talking about the statutes, talking about